Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Carrying on from getting everything out of the pots, we now need to start putting some stuff back in. So I've got 3 Paphiopedilums here. I'm trying a new mix on the grounds that I've usually put quite a bit of moss in, and we're not having any moss basically. Now unfortunately there is a few bits of moss in here. It just happens when I mix some stuff up and I've got some left over, I pour it back in the bag rather than waste it, so it would have whatever was in it before. And obviously there was a few bits of moss, but not enough to worry about, quite honestly. A couple of little bits. So that's small bark. Now because of, again, the last time I mixed some stuff up, that also has got some medium bark in it, but it's just going to have some more, so that doesn't matter. Now I'm going on the lines that Ed pots his Paphiopedilums up in quite a large chunky mix. I assume he just waters an awful lot more often than I would do, because he's often got open pots as well. So his stuff's going to dry quicker than mine would normally do. That's never a bad thing, apart from the workload obviously. Now if I go too mad and have a chunky mix with these, they'd have to change their watering pattern, their watering cycle. Because at the moment, these 3 live in with my cooler, shadier ones, on the grounds they should stay moist. And that comes round every so often and I water them all, unless any are still wet, in which case they miss a run. But if these are going to dry out quicker, they'd have to be kept separate so that they don't get forgotten, especially in new bark. Right. So we're going to have something new, and effectively this is to replace the moss. This is charcoal. I've never had charcoal before. One thing I will say is the bag is absolutely full of dust. I presume that will reseal again. I don't know how much of this to add in, but it's supposed to help keep media sweet, stop it going off. It's also supposed to absorb excess nutrients. I've always queried that. How does it know which nutrients are excess nutrients and which are ones that are actually wanted by the plant? We could put that in the cobblers section. I would say it either absorbs nutrients or it doesn't. Not going to have any decision making process in it, that's for sure. Anyway, we have some in the mix. I don't know how much it's supposed to have, but it's got some. And we're going to have some perlite, sponge rock. And unfortunately I've only got the giant stuff, but any giant bits can be just broken. Now this charcoal appears to be quite dusty, but the first thing these pots will get is a really good pour through, and that will remove dust, it will wash it through and out the bottom. Right, so I don't want giant pieces of this. I'll put them in quite small pots for a start. That'll do. Right, so that's what I'm going to use. It's a mixture of small bark, probably about half and half with medium bark, and some charcoal, and some perlite. Now I used to avoid using perlite because it gets algae, it's a real algae magnet, but now that I put my clear pots inside black pots, that doesn't happen. So I'm quite happy to bring it back in the mix again now. I'm just going to wash my hands, they're covered in that. Looks like I've been doing the barbecue out in the garden. You can always tell who's in charge of the barbecue. It's the one with the black hands and the smudges down the side of their face where they've had an itchy nose. Oh, you're in charge of the barbecue, are you? Black nose? So there we go. Right, I have assorted pots. Now, this one, I believe, was sticking out the top of the pot because that root is long. Now if this is ever going to grow some roots, you can see the nubbins where the roots should grow from. Hang on, let's find my camera here. See, this is where the next set of roots should come from. Well, I've either got to bury those 2 leaves or remove them, because the roots aren't going to come out any lower down. They're going to come out from there. And the only way they can be encouraged to grow is if that section of the plant is in the media, or at least touching it. Which might mean this has to go in a larger pot than I would want, or, other choice, cut the root. To get some new roots to grow, is that a good idea? Right, let's see how small a pot I can get that in. I'd like it in something like that, but you can see that's quite a shallow pot. That's a deeper one, not by much, but now you can see straight away, yeah, the plant is going to be too high in that pot, but I can wiggle it. It's going to end up having to go right over to the side like that. It's still going to be high. Well, let's give it a try. All I can do is add the media and see if it will stay in the pot low down. If it pops up, then this isn't going to work. But nothing gained, you know, all that sort of stuff. This does feel like an incredibly chunky mix for something this small. Still. Right, so I'm just looking for a section with lots of small bark now to just go around the base of the plant. If the media comes up too high, then every time I water it, all the bark will float off the top. Well, that's quite a bit deeper than it was before. Settle that in. It's still not right. It's better than it was, but it's not right. So, out you come, think again. To get that plant where I want it, that root's either going to have to bend, in which case it might break, but if I don't, I can't get the plant where I want it. So I've got to take the risk in the root actually breaking. And if it does, so be it. But I'm going to have to take that risk. I've got to get this plant down in where those root nubbins are, and then hopefully they will sprout. But they're not going to sprout sticking up in the air. In the air, whatever. I'm just looking for a couple of handfuls that haven't got large parts in, just to get round the base of the plant. And also, being in bark with no moss, it's not going to stay wet, so the base of the plant isn't going to stay wet. It'll stay wet as long as I water it. But there must be some small bits in here somewhere. Right, I'll top the rest up with anything because it hasn't got any roots in. Right, so we've got a root now sat down the bottom. I've still got some gaps here. Typical, when I want lots of tiny little pieces, I end up getting big bits. Like that and that. Get out. There's a nice handful of small stuff. Just want some small stuff around the base of the plant. Right, that looks a bit better. The plant now looks at a reasonable depth. It's still a bit wobbly, but it's an awful lot better than it was, and if I do get those roots to sprout now, they will come straight out into the media, which is what I'm after. Paphiopedilum roots that decide to come out in the air are not going to make it, basically. Dry out very fast and the root tip dies back. Very quickly as well. So, right, so I'm going to have to go careful watering that because it is going to come out over the top. I'll have a little bit of pressing down just to hopefully stop it all flowing over the side of the pot when I water it. So that's got that one a lot lower down now, so we'll see what it does. And we managed it without actually having to cut the root, so I'm pleased about that. Right, next one, another little tiny one. And this has only got 2 roots with no active growing tips, and again it's another one of these where, whoops, if it's going to grow any roots, they're going to come out at the base and they'll need to get into something. But this one I should be able to get into quite a small pot. Yes, you can go in there. Now I'll be back in a minute, but I'm not happy with using a mix as big as this with these tiny little plants, so I'm going to go and get some more small bark. I'll be back. Right, so I'm just going to mix up like a separate section just for this little tiny plant. So just add some small bark, and then I can pick some bits of charcoal and perlite out of the rest of the mix and just bring it over into this little bit so that we haven't got so much chunky stuff. Right, let's see what we can do with this one then. A little bit in the bottom, not a lot, and that should fit right down in the middle. Trying to avoid getting any big bits right at the base of the plant, if possible. I suppose if the base of the plant is slightly low, as long as it's in an airy mix, it's not so bad. If it was in moss and planted a bit too low, the base of the plant would stay permanently soggy, and that's when the rot can set in. Right, that'll do for that one, and when I water that, that will settle the mix a lot better than it is now. So that's 2 done. Now the bigger one. I can be a bit more heavy-handed with this one. Right, this one has got a good set of root systems. I don't really need to worry about this growing new roots, but I would like to get it in a much smaller pot than what it was in before. Something like with an air cone. Yeah. See if I can get it in something like that. So I'll get a bit of bark in the to make a flat bottom with the top of the air cone, and then we'll. This is going to go in here whether it likes it or not. And I think what I'm going to try and do is coil the roots round. Try and get them to curl round each other. That one doesn't want to go, it's a big thick chunky one, but these are okay. These are flexible enough to be able to just wind round. If there's a nasty click, then I was wrong. See, that's got that root ball quite tight now, except for that one. Do you know, I'm going to cut that one off. I bet that's why it went in a deep pot last time, because of that one sticking down. It's a big fat chunky root. Was a big fat chunky root. Now this, coiled up like that, should fit in this pot quite nicely. I'm going to have to try and lift the pot onto it. How low is the plant? That's not bad. That's not bad. Not bad at all. Nope. It's going to have to come out. Plant's too high. It's got to go in there. It's So I'm going to have to coil the roots round even tighter. Could have been being held up by one large chunky bit of bark in the bottom of the pot, I suppose. Right, so let's start again. Oh, that is a long root. Right, let's tuck that up like that. Ah, and therein lies the result of bending it too much. Luckily we do have spares. For me it's more important to get this in a smaller pot. It was staying wet in the winter far too long, which means the water in the pot gets stale. It's not so much, I mean it does need to stay moist, but you know, if water stands for any length of time it effectively turns stagnant, doesn't it? And that will happen inside your pot that stays wet too long. So I don't want this staying wet through the winter again like it did last year. I was watering it like every sort of 25 days. You think how long that water had been in that media if it was still wet at that point. I mean, at some point there were times when I actually watered the pot to refresh the water, even though it wasn't dry, just to get some, wash out the old water and wash some new water in. You shouldn't be mucking about doing that sort of stuff. Right, my new growth is sat right on the media, right on the top, and if it produces any roots they should go straight down in. That is a much better depth for that plant, much better. That should do much better now. I've got a few airy spaces in there actually, but I'm certainly not going to force that media down and crush those roots. So you've already seen one break, they are relatively fragile. Right, that's those three done. Now what else is going to go in a pot over here? I'm still debating the hibiki. I'll show you what it looks like now. It's -1 new growth. I lost one trying to wash the roots off. It's got a nice clean root system, -1 new growth. For a Dendrobium this is quite a fine root system. It would lend itself to going on a mount. It would also lend itself to going in a pot. Now the last one I tried on a mount didn't fail because it was on a mount, it failed because it got some sort of fungal infection on the leaves which took the plant down. It was doing very well on the mount. It'll be a right pain to try and get it to sit on a mount. It's such a compact plant. You know, if I'm going to put that on a mount like that, sorry, get it that way round, like that, I'm going to have to tie it through the centre of the plant to hold it in place, or possibly even wire it. And in doing that, I'm going to be cutting into new growths just to hold it in place. I think you're going to have to go in a pot, much to my annoyance. I like most of my Dendrobiums on mounts, but I have got some in pots. Yeah, pot for you, in which case stay with the mix I've got. That's the only reason to change it. What sort of size pot do you need to go in? You need to. I've got an awful lot of new growths coming out that when they expand, this hibiki, this cane here, is still not as big as they can grow. So if these new growths push on well and get up to full size, this plant's going to at least double in size this year. So I think I need room for it to breathe. I think I might go one size up. By the time we get to the end of the year and we go into winter, it should have filled the pot with roots. I'll be back, I need a bigger pot. Yeah, I've gone for a couple of sizes bigger to allow this to expand. It's about to do it. It's not like I'm sort of thinking, will it, won't it grow into that pot? It will. There's just no doubt about it. It's going to grow into that pot. Right, so we'll have quite a lot of the chunky stuff in the bottom of the pot, because it's quite deep, and this is not a deep root system yet. It may well be one day, but it isn't yet. And then we'll have some more of the big stuff. But it's a fine root system. So we will have some small bark. We'll have some more of the dirty stuff, dirty black stuff. I don't think this charcoal is going to last long actually. I thought it was a litre, sounded quite a bit, but now it's here. But then, how much potting have I got to do this year? Not a lot. Repotting. A lot of the new stuff that comes in doesn't very often go in a pot. I think you've noticed that. It's not pre-planned, you know, I don't sort of think, right, I'll buy that because it can be mounted. It's just the way it goes. Right. Chuck me pot in there. This is going to be fun actually, trying to get the mix in round this root system, because the root system is incredibly tight. So it's not going to be easy, it's going to have to be threaded in from the sides, and as you push down it gradually makes its way in. Be quite likely for some more new growths to come off as well while we're doing this. Right, so I'm going to sink the pot to about there, push it over to one side and get as much media in this side as I can, because I've got a nice big gap, and we'll fill that gap up to about halfway, and then we'll move the plant and do the same thing the other side. So we'll now push the plant back against that new media and fill up the other side, but only halfway. I'm only going halfway so that I can see what I'm doing. Then we'll come round and push over there. Some more in. There will end up being quite a tight ball of roots in the centre of the pot, but I'm still of a mind that all of these new growths are going to produce new roots soon, and they're just going to push their way out from the centre, because that's where all the new growths are. Most of the new growths are around the edge of the plant. Some of them are in the middle, but most of them are around the edge of the plant. So that's where the new roots are going to come, and they'll head off towards the edge of the pot. I don't want the base of the plant actually buried. I've got to allow for winter. If this isn't growing much in the winter and slows right down to next to nothing, I don't want the base of the plant wet. What are we doing? Nearly there. I don't mind if I can see some roots on this, it really doesn't matter. It's going to push down in there anyway. Is that new? There's another one gone. I did say it would be incredibly easy to lose some new roots. That's 2. So we might only have 10 now instead of 12. If I only had 2, I would be really ratty now, because we'd be now down to 0. I can afford a couple coming off to get this potted how I want it. I'd prefer not to have lost those 2. So one came off while I was playing with it under the sink. That'll do. That'll water in nicely. That'll do. Right, so that's 4 in pots. It was just all about to come off the edge of the paper and go on the floor. Now what I've got left is the 2 pieces of Tolumnia, this funny little piece of Dendrobium something or other that I need to go and look up and find out how that grows, to find out what to do with it. The Tolumnias pieces are just going to go on a single mount as a single plant. I see no point in separating them, but they'll be up the same way this time, rather than one pointing upwards and one pointing downwards. And then the only other one I've got to deal with is our new plant, which is going in a wholly clay pot. So I think I'll call that the potting session, The holy clay pot is a different style of potting. Muck on my hands. Let's just itch my nose, then I'll have barbecue face. Yeah, so that's 3 pots done. That'll do for a video, that's not bad. And then I'll come back again and we'll do the other 3. Which is 1 I don't know, that may go back in a pot, I don't know. The Tolumnia, which will definitely be mounted. And then the new plant that is going in a holy clay pot, as do all my Cattleya types. So I haven't made my mind up whether to take that off or not, or just bury it. It's going in large chunky bark. If it gets buried, it doesn't matter. Right, so see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.